diplomatic row could be brewing between South Africa and Poland. This is amid the impasse over President Cyril Ramaphosa's chartered flight that's still stuck in Warsaw. On that plane are 120 people, mainly the president's security detail, as well as a small group of journalists. Let's get some reaction now, and we speak to political analyst Dr. Mpumelelo Mkhabela. Dr. Mkhabela, thank you very much for your time. Let's actually kick off this conversation with what is actually in the news right now. The president's security detail as he enters Kiev by train. We are told his security detail very, very thin. What do you make of this?
Good morning, Stoli. Well, it seems to me that it's a combination of factors here. It appears that the preparations, at least the logistical preparations for the president's visit to Warsaw, was not up to speed. I think that before the South African delegation left here, there was probably no clear understanding of what they are allowed to bring. And that sort of stuff. And when they landed there, they appeared to be, again, another other tension about what is it that they are allowed to bring there, including personnel as well as other security equipment that they had with them. I listened to the audio clip there of Wale Rode, the president's security advisor, even suggesting that perhaps the Poles might be accused of racism. But the other element, Koli, is this. I think this whole thing basically says something about the decline of South Africa's standing. Because even if perhaps there were logistical mishaps or misunderstanding, if South Africa was viewed as a country of high reputation, worthy of its respect, that could have been resolved right there when they landed. The fact that South Africa was dragged almost more than a day, if you put it that way, and this thing is not being resolved, says something about what people think of us.
Yeah. Dr. Mkhabela, I think it's also important. I don't want to be accused of being overly emotional or, what is the word, alarmist here. But the president is in a country that is continuously being pummeled by weapons coming from Russia. He is in Kiev right now, as we are told. He entered that country by train. He's in the capital, Kiev. The understanding here that the president is in a war zone with very thin security detail. Most of the arms that are supposed to follow him are stuck in an airport in Warsaw.
Yeah, indeed, of course, as his own presidential security advisor said, the president's security could be under threat. However, what would save the day here is the fact that this trip, it's a high-profile trip of this African delegation. Of course, our president being part of it, and Russia is aware of it. President Putin is aware of it, and of course, the host, which is President Zelensky of Ukraine, is also aware of it. So Ukraine's partners in Europe, like Poland and many others. So during this visit, there's unlikely to be any exchange of weaponry or fighting that might actually impact on this high-profile diplomatic visit by these African heads of state who are seeking a peaceful resolution of the conflict there. So from that perspective, I would say that Kyiv is duty-bound to make sure that the president's safe. But so is the aggressor, in this case, Russia.
Let's go back then to this peace mission by the African heads of state. So the President Cyril Ramaphosa, at least what I've seen on the visuals, is him, a head of state from South Africa, the Zambian President, Hakainde Hichilema. I thought I saw him in the visuals as well. But the president's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, telling reporters a little earlier, and I want to quote directly here, the presidents of Congo, Brazzaville, Egypt, and Uganda have sent their representatives. I can't comment on the reasons their presidents did not travel. What does that do for this mission? Because that, for me, is watering down the stature of this trip that has been punted so widely by the president to say there are 6 African heads of state that are going there on a mission to bring about peace?
Well, you are correct. It does water down the entire mission, and it undermines the spirit with which this whole idea was conceived. And because it sends a message that some of the leaders, the African leaders who were part of this initiative, might have begun to doubt it, might have begun to doubt its effect, and therefore not lend themselves to give weight to it. So it's really concerning, especially in the light of the fact that they were telling the whole world that what they were bringing to the table would actually solve the conflict. And you know, this is a delegation coming from the developing world.
Yeah.
And the conflict here involves not just Ukraine and Russia, but it involves, you know, well-established nations that, you know, have been around forever, fought in the First and the Second World War, and were part of the Cold War. And NATO is actually also directly or indirectly involved, if you want. So to get involved in that high-stakes kind of diplomacy, in this manner that the African leaders are doing, while some of them are not wanting to participate, not wanting to follow up on their commitments, is really concerning because it does water down the whole mission.
Let me conclude the conversation with a point that you made in your initial response, and that is South Africa's standing in relation to what has happened at the airport. You're saying that South Africa's standing perhaps is a bit shaky right now on the world stage. You take me back to the words of the U.S. President, Joe Biden, who at the start of the war in February last year, he made some comments in relation to any country that seeks to associate itself with Russia. Perhaps they might be treated as the scum of the earth. I'm not saying that these were the words that he were directly using. I just can't have the exact words he used, but they were somewhat in relation to what I've just said to you, that they perhaps will be treated shabbily.
Yeah, but remember, Tony, South Africa's defense or South Africa's position in relation to that is to say we are non-aligned when it comes to this conflict. Although this non-alignment, in my view, is merely rhetorical, in practice, South Africa is firmly on the Russian side. That's why even how it characterizes this war in Ukraine, it's kind of like almost as if two countries of equal weight, you know, are involved in a dispute. Whereas, in fact, the reality is that Russia invaded a sovereign territory, which is Ukraine, and as a result of which now you are having this conflict. So South Africa's standing has been harmed on this because all along it was always very consistent, Tony. If you remember very well, when the U.S. invaded Iraq, South Africa was very clear that we are opposed to the invasion. We prefer a multilateral way to resolve the conflict. And these so-called weapons of mass destruction, there are international norms and institutions to deal with it. Let's focus on that.
Yeah.
And in the end, South Africa was proven correct because eventually there was no war of the weapons of mass destruction that were found in Iraq. So the U.S. was found wanting there. And South Africa has been correct on Israel, for example, on the Palestinian question, and also on the question of Morocco, the Western Sahara, that you can't invade another country. But then, when it came to Russia, South Africa changed its position. So in that way, it undermines itself.
Dr. Mpumelelo Mkhabela, thank you very much for your analysis of a very concerning situation around our president.